Good evening, everyone. For those I've not had the chance to meet, my name is John Heybusch, and I have the honor of being the Executive Director of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you here this evening. In honor of our men and women in uniform who defend our freedom around the world, if you'd please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under all, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Before we get started this evening, I'd like to recognize a few special guests we have with us. I'll begin with the great Ventura County Clerk, Mark Lunn. Mark, thank you for coming. As well, we have with us the Mayor Pro Tem of Agoura Hills, Dennis Weber. Dennis, good to have you. I also would like to recognize this young lady here in red. Her name is Stacy Taylor. Stacy works for one of the greatest Americans walking the earth today. His name is Gary Sinise. So we welcome to the stage tonight one of the most successful and talented novelists in America, Brad Thor. We are honored that you came to us tonight, Brad, and on behalf of Mrs. Reagan, I want to thank you for taking time out of your really busy schedule to be here with your many fans and to sign all the books that you did. We really, really appreciate that, so thank you. Now, for those of you in the audience who have read just one or perhaps all 12 of Brad's bestsellers, and when I say bestseller, in many respects, I also mean in the realm of #1 bestsellers, you know Brad as a terrific fiction writer who has been churning out one book after another for the past 10 years. From his first work, Lions of Lucerne, to his most recent, Blacklist, he and Scott Horvath have had readers in dozens of countries on the edge of their seats in one international intrigue or political thriller after another. Now, I referenced that Brad's work involved fiction because that's what his stories are in a literal sense. But for those who have followed Brad for years and who have an understanding that it is often life that imitates art, there's nothing fictional whatsoever about the lengths that Brad has gone to in order to ensure that his readers get the most realistic storytelling possible. He's been rewarded for that, and he's paid a price for it as well. Now, on the rewarded side, rewarded in the sense that beyond his writing, he is a recognized expert on topics of national security and international terrorism. He's appeared on countless TV and radio programs to comment on the breaking news of the day. He has served as a member of the Department of Homeland Security's Analytic Red Cell Unit to assist our experts in forecasting where and how the next threats to our security may come. And something I am personally jealous of, he's had the opportunity to shadow a black ops group in Afghanistan to get firsthand knowledge of what real-life American heroes must face on a daily basis to protect our security. In the realm of paying the price, one of his books, The Last Patriot, a courageous piece of work delving into the work of Islam, became so controversial it was banned in Saudi Arabia. It drove so many death threats against Brad and his family, he had to wear a bulletproof vest to book signings like this and literally move his loved ones to a safer spot. I am sure that as Brad wrote, that he gave a particular quote I thought was just magnificent. He said, "I believe that what we are most destined to do in life, we are most afraid of." Well, Brad, we want to thank you for your courage, your commitment to freedom and what made America great, and your extraordinary writing, which has thrilled all of us throughout the years. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Brad Thor.
a really nice
Absolutely.
introduction. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? Thank you very much. This is a real thrill for me, and at the risk of attracting more death threats, I got to tell you how happy I am to have traveled to my Mecca, the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library. This is fantastic. All right, here's what I'd like to do tonight. I want to tell you a little bit about how I got started writing, tell you where the idea for Blacklist came from, and then get to my favorite part of when I get together. I'm a reader, and I was a reader long before I was ever a writer. I love books. You all love books, and I love to talk about books. So again, what I'd like to do, talk about how I got started, where the idea for Blacklist came from, and then I want to open it up so we can do a Q&A, so I can answer your questions. We can have a fun discussion here. So I was born in Chicago, Illinois. My dad is a no longer active Marine. And he had joined the Marine Corps as his ticket out of the south side of Chicago. My mom was a flight attendant for TWA back in the 1960s, the glamour days of airline travel. I always, if I catch the Tony Curtis movie Boeing, Boeing on TV over the weekends, I always watch it because it reminds me of what I think it must have been like for my mom. I hope she didn't date a guy like Tony Curtis in that movie, but I still love the appeal of that period in airline travel. So in my family, the arts were something to make you better rounded. They weren't necessarily a career path. And my dad was he still is, in real estate development, building office buildings, hotels, did a lot of stuff in Century City and in Orange County. And everyone he met seemed to be a graduate of the University of Southern California. And he told me, yeah, fight on. I know we got a lot of Trojans here today. My dad said it was like the Cosa Nostra. He said, USC, the network was unbelievable. If you and I were up for a job and this was our potential employer and we both went to USC and you went anywhere else, I was getting the job. That was the legend of SC. So my dad wanted me to go to SC, and I said, great, SC sounds fantastic. I get away from the cold Chicago winters, and I visited the campus, loved it, and I said, okay, that's where I want to go. Now, my brother and I jokingly refer to my dad as the Great Santini. My dad isn't like the Great Santini, but it's just kind of a funny thing because my dad jokes around and does Marine Corps inspection, the white glove on the door frame, bouncing the quarter off the bedclothes to see that they're tight enough. And the Great Santini wanted me to study business administration at USC and go into the entrepreneurship program. I got about 2 years into business administration at SC, and it was second semester, February, getting close to Valentine's Day, and we had an economics professor that came in trembling. He was sweating. He was so excited about this problem that we were going to solve in this economics class. He said, you're a flower store manager. You've got 7 flower stores. You have X amount of orders for long stem roses, but only so many vases. He was so excited about this. And I said, I can't do this. And I closed my book and I stood up from my seat, and all my friends were going, what are you doing? I said, I don't know, but I'd rather take a bullet between the eyes than be a middle manager in a flower store chain for the rest of my life. I said, I'm not doing this. I went back to my dorm, moped for a couple days trying to figure out what I was going to do, and I went to the career counseling office at SC, and I took a test that's known as the Strong-Campbell personality test. And it doesn't tell you if you have an aptitude for certain career paths, but it does tell you if your interests line up with certain people who are very happy in what they're doing. Took the test, scored off the charts in writing and in publishing. And I switched my major at SC to creative writing and also studied film and television production there. I didn't change my report card. I found out that I could change my report card up to 48 hours. My major, didn't change my major. Anyway, got to be junior year, end of junior year, and the Great Santini wanted to know why I was no longer in economics and any business classes. There was creative writing, introduction to poetry, from page to screen, all of this stuff. And I was very lucky because it was the early 90s when a lot of bond traders were leaving New York and coming out to LA to get involved in the movie business. And that was filtering into the business publications that the Great Santini was reading. So it was in the Wall Street Journal, Fortune, Forbes. So I told him, I said, you know, I've gone over and this is going to be my major. I'm doing creative writing and film and television production. He thought it was brilliant. I thought it was a death sentence for me. And he says, this is great because they do these things for the movies called completion bonds. You're going to switch. You can get your post-grad in finance. Brilliant. He said, I couldn't have thought of it better for you. Way to go. So I said, dear God, just let me get out with a creative writing degree and I can worry about the great Santini afterwards. Now, I was working while I was in college, leasing apartments near CBS, Beverly and Fairfax, in a building called the Broadcast Center. The Kasdans, who are big real estate developers in LA, I worked for them, was leasing apartments. Now, I graduate from SC, and I had done a semester abroad in Paris. My mom learned how to speak French when she worked for TWA because she was New York, Paris, Paris, New York, and you had to speak English and French. So I wanted to go back to Paris, and I was going to write. I knew I wanted to write. I'd done a semester abroad, a lot of friends there, and I had friends say, you know what, one of our kids is going away to school. You can have their room. Come stay with us. So I took advantage of that, and I started writing in Paris. Not too cliche, right? I'm going to go to Paris. I'm going to write a novel. So I go to Paris, and I start writing. It turns out to be a thriller. I didn't know what I was going to write. I sat down, started writing, and I got 3 chapters into it and said, I can't do this. Oh, it's boring. Oh, it's this. What it was is I was afraid of failure. What if I take all this time and I try to write a novel and A, I don't complete it, or B, it's no good? I really believe that which you're most destined to do in life, as John so kindly brought up, that I've said in interviews and other talks, I really believe that which you're most destined to do, you're often most afraid of. And it's in conquering that fear that you really, really achieve success. But success was eluding me in Paris. So the laptop, and I bought this in the USC bookstore in the early 90s. I mean, the thing was this big and it had DOS. There wasn't even Windows then. And so I paid probably $1,000 to ship. It wasn't that expensive, but a lot to ship it home. And I traveled through Europe. And I met all these kids who had backpacks and had their train passes and all this kind of stuff. And I had loved to travel. The great Santini saw the world as a Marine. My mom saw it as a flight attendant. I always thought travel made me a better American. To go outside my country, to realize how good I've got it as a citizen of this republic. I love that. And I said, I'm going to do a TV show. I'm going to do a travel show to encourage young Americans to travel. Don't wait until you're retired to see the world. Because, I really believe that if you could get outside your own country, see that there's other ways of doing things, you could then have something to kind of compare and contrast your American experience with. And I was convinced that if people went to Europe and went to these other places, that it would make them more patriotic, make them better Americans. So I was in Europe. I had come up with this idea. I came back and started trying to get it off the ground. Just about the time the great Santini networked into somebody at William Morris and said, you know what? While you're waiting to do your finance stuff, I think you ought to think about the agent training program at William Morris. Be a great way to get you into the business and learn about Hollywood. Well, I don't know how many of you in here have seen that movie Swimming with Sharks with Kevin Spacey, where the assistant takes his boss hostage, the training. So I was convinced it was going to, I did not want to fetch people's dry cleaning. I'm a capitalist. I really believe in starting from the bottom up, but I'd heard nothing but horror stories. And the people at William Morris I met were fantastic. But over the few months that I was doing my interviews there and everything, I managed to successfully pitch public television. And they said, we'd like to do the show. We think it's great. At that time, the only person doing travel basically was Rick Steves, Travels in Europe. And admittedly, it was not for my age group at the time. It was a different age group. So I get to my final meeting at William Morris, and it's with Bob Crestani, who is heading the television department. And he said, you know, something tells me your heart's really not in being an agent. And I said, well, guess what, Bob? I actually just successfully pitched a nationwide show to public television. And he was such a sweet guy. He said, listen, go do it. He said, you will not regret doing it, and I never have. I ended up doing the show for a couple of seasons. They used to air me back to back with Rick Steves. I was the producer, I was the writer, I was the host, and I worked my tail off. It was hard work working at public television, because not only did I produce, but I had to go find the money as well. So I was wearing 2 hats, but I really enjoyed it. During that process, I had met my wife, we got engaged, and we got married, and Rail Europe Group was my sponsor at the time. These are the people that sell the rail passes to the travel agencies, and they get you around on the trains. And they said, well, we're going to give you rail passes for you and your wife, and then as many overnight train compartments as you want, we'll arrange that for you as well. Now, in addition to being Norwegian and Swedish, we have a little bit of Scottish in us, and we wouldn't cough up a buck if we were choking on it. And I thought, ooh, overnight train rides, great way to save the money on the hotel rooms. I'm like, this is good, I'm in. And I thought, oh, you know, I loved Agatha Christie, Murder on the Orient Express, James Bond on those European overnight trains, even North by Northwest with Cary Grant. I always found that very romantic, and I thought, how perfect for a honeymoon. Well, little did I know, Mrs. T gets motion sick on the trains. It did not turn out to be as romantic as I thought it was going to be. But here's what's interesting. The last leg of the trip, so it was private train compartments throughout, but the last leg was going to be from Oktoberfest in Munich to Amsterdam. It was the one leg where we could not get a private train compartment. It was going to be shared. Now, I had been on lots of trains with lots of shared compartments in my time of traveling through Europe. It's like the Three Stooges. You've got 6 bunks on each side, 2 attempted robberies. I had a gypsy family with a hobo stove start cooking in the room once. It was interesting. And I wanted to marry Meg Ryan. I did even better. My beautiful wife is so wonderful. She'd never been to Europe. I wanted to give her the perfect experience, right? I'm already the protective husband who wants everything to be great for my wife. So I'm freaking out about this. Every single city we go to in Europe where there's a train station, I'm stopping in saying, hey, has there been a cancellation on the Munich to Amsterdam overnight? No, sir, no, sir, no, sir, no, sir. Or, hold on, I have to find somebody that speaks the language you're talking to me in. And my wife finally said, she said, you are ruining our honeymoon. She said, we're spending all this time in the train stations for one dumb overnight train ride. How bad can it be? And I said, oh, you've got no idea. It can be bad, real bad. My wife said to me, she said, well, I don't understand something. We have no power to change this. And you're the one, Brad, who always tells your friends who have problems, everything happens for a reason and it always works out for the best. And I said, well, that's what I tell them when they won't follow my advice and I want them to stop talking. Hey, don't worry about it. It all works out for the best. And she said, no, I'm sorry. That's it. We're just going to see what happens. Okay. So very difficult for me to let go, control, and all right, we're going to see what happens. We're in Italy, and we're in a piazza one night. And my wife, so now I know something about her I didn't know, which is the motion sick thing. And she wants to know something about me. What would you regret on your deathbed never having done? And before I could grab the words out of the air and put them right back in my big mouth, I told her, writing a book and getting it published. So now it's, here, honey, here's my man card, and I put it out there because if I don't live up to it now, it's going to get, how much respect is my wife going to have for me if I don't try to go after my dream? And she's so wonderful. She said, when we get home, you're going to start spending 2 hours a day. No phone, no fax, no email. You need to make this dream come true. I don't want you to get to that point where you say, what if I had only done this? Wonderful, wonderful woman. So this was kind of neat because when I was doing the travel show for public television, I had come up with a great idea for a book title. How many people in here have ever been to Lucerne, Switzerland? I know somebody showed me some pictures today. But there's a very well-traveled crowd. For those of you who have not been to Lucerne, there is a beautiful monument carved in a rock face in Lucerne. It is of a dying lion. It has a spear broken off in its side. And it was carved to commemorate the 700-plus Swiss Guard who died defending King Louis and Marie Antoinette in the initial throes of the French Revolution. Mark Twain called it the most moving piece of rock in the world. I like the alliteration. I like the sound of the Lion of Lucerne. And I thought, you know what? The Lions of Lucerne. If I ever write a book, that's going to be the title. I have no idea how I'm going to weave Switzerland into the story, but that's going to be my title. All right, so what do we have now? I'm on my honeymoon. My wife has now found out my deepest, darkest secret. She said, I'll keep the world at bay. I'll bring you coffee. You need to do it. Okay, so now I need to do it, and I've got a title. Well, let's see. We go and we end up in Munich. And now this is a little secret that is a big open secret. All my friends warned me that the beer in Germany is much stronger than the beer in America. I had to find out the hard way. So the next evening, after one night at Oktoberfest, we're going to the train station. I have an Oktoberfest-sized hangover, and I'm walking, dragging my bag, and now I'm thinking, who's going to be in the train compartment? I'm like, okay, it's going to be Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy, Charles Manson, the guy with the hook and the bad limp that we always talk about around the campfire when we were kids. He's going to be on one of the bunks. I'm convinced it's just going to be a rogues gallery in there. I'm going to have to sleep with one eye open because I don't want anything to happen to my wife. We get on the train, and there's a lovely brother and sister from Atlanta, Georgia there. And they were the ones we were sharing the compartment with. They were both big fans of my TV show. And so we sat down, started talking with them. I found out the sister had the same love of books that I do. And we talked about writing, we talked about books all night long until her brother and my wife said, you guys have to zip it so the rest of us can get some sleep. We could have kept going and going and going all night talking about books. And the next morning we talked some more, and she said, well, are you going to make more TV shows when you get home? And I said, yeah, I'll probably do some more TV shows, but I've decided I'm going to write a novel. So now not only my wife knew, but now I'm telling other people. So I really can't back out of this commitment now because I'm telling everyone I meet. So the next morning, we arrive in Amsterdam, okay? We arrive in Amsterdam, and we're on the platform, and we go to exchange business cards. You know, it was great. We had such a good time. Let's stay in touch. You know how this goes on vacation. She gives me her business card, the sister. And lo and behold, she's a sales rep for Simon & Schuster. Could not believe it. Now, I get the card. Mrs. T is behind me. Mrs. T can see the card, and I can feel the I told you so eyes burning into the back of my head. Me, the guy who was kept trying to change the compartment. So we arrive in Amsterdam. This happens. So, wow, this is amazing. I've decided I'm going to write a book. I have a title that I've been carrying for 2 years. Now I've met somebody in the publishing industry. Unbelievable. It's raining. We go to, I'm kind of happy. This is kind of neat. It's neat for about a block. I didn't have an umbrella. And I'm, you know, my excitement with meeting a sales rep and the book thing, it started going downhill when it was a 5-block walk and no cabs to the hotel, and we're soaked. Get to the hotel. Oh, Mr. and Mrs. Thor, I'm sorry. Know it's your honeymoon, the manager tells us, but the room's not ready yet. He says, you know, here, let's get you some towels, dry off, if you want to change clothes out of your bags. And then there's a great little cafe around the corner. Why don't you go get a sandwich or a cup of coffee and your room will be ready. He wanted to put flowers and chocolates in there and have it perfect for us. Great guy. So we go, and I'm grumbling all the way to the cafe. You know, come on, we had a reservation. Why is it? And my wife's like, you know, it's going to be okay. You know, just relax. We're here. We got here safely. Let's enjoy it. It's our honeymoon. We go sit in this little cafe. We're the only people there. Now, Louis L'Amour, the Western writer, was famous for always having a book in his back pocket. If he was standing online at the post office, the book came out, he'd start reading. My wife, Trish, is the same way. She always has a book with her, without fail. There's always one in her purse or whatever. I'm not that well prepared. I get on the airplane going, oh, you know what? I probably should have brought socks. And maybe a toothbrush while I'm gone this week would be a nice thing to have. I'm not as organized as Mrs. T. So we're sitting there. She's reading her book, and I'm looking around. I'm like, okay, there's another bicycle. I think that guy's got wooden shoes. Oh, look, a windmill. Oh, some tulips. And that got boring after a while, looking out the windows. And it's raining. I'm not seeing tons of people, which is something I love to do, is people watch. But I look over a couple tables, and there's a newspaper. And I go to get the newspaper, and it is an English language newspaper, the International Herald Tribune. I pick it up. I start reading through it, and I find this little story in there about a Swiss intelligence officer who has embezzled all this money from the Swiss army to train his own shadow militia high in the Alps with high-tech weapons from his own private arsenal. And I said, that's my story. And that's where The Lions of Lucerne, my first book, came from. The sales rep at Simon & Schuster, Cindy Jackson, helped work it up through the ranks at Simon & Schuster. This is my 12th book now with Simon & Schuster, which is fantastic. And so that's just kind of in a nutshell how the writing began. Now, as far as Blacklist is concerned, this book was a blast to write. It was a lot of fun. If I had to give it to you in one sentence, Blacklist in one sentence is someone is padding the president's kill list. Now, there's a subplot beneath that, which is if you're a high-tech, if you're a high-speed counter-terrorism person, or if you're an intelligence agent and you're used to using technology to nail the bad guys, what happens if you are purposely put on the list and you're not a bad guy? How do you unplug long enough and evade the surveillance technology to clear your name? And my job as a thriller writer is to beat the headlines. That's what my friend Brad Meltzer, who's a great author, says. And by the way, Brad Meltzer's books are fantastic. After you've read all of mine, I highly recommend Brad's books. Great, great author. But Brad is right. A thriller writer's job is to beat the headlines. And I've wanted to write this book for the last several years and have been slowly working on it, just collecting articles and all that kind of stuff. I really believe that the explosion in surveillance technology in the United States is going to be the next big thing we're discussing in the public square. Now, my job first and foremost is I'm a thriller author. So it's toes in the sand, book in the hand, beach read. I want you to have a great white knuckle, edge of your seat ride with my books. That's my job. But the second hat I wear is I think there's a lot of interesting things happening in the world. If you are like many people readers that I have who email me saying, Brad, I have to read your books with my laptop open because I can't believe this stuff is true. And I go online, and by the way, I won't say Google it. You'll read why in this book. I might say Bing it or search it online. But it's fascinating what is happening with surveillance technology. And we had a warning from Ben Franklin, one of my favorite founding fathers. And I'm going to paraphrase Ben Franklin, who said, "Those who would trade a little liberty for a little security deserve neither and will lose both." So that's the question that I wanted to raise in this book, is where do you personally place the line between liberty and security? How much liberty are you willing to give up for how much security? It's a very, very interesting topic. But the amount of research I did for this, it is stunning. I have reams of paper that I printed out articles. The hardest thing for me in writing this book was to pick the real juicy stuff to put in there because there's so much juicy stuff. To give you one example, so beating the headlines, as we were preparing the manuscript, getting it ready to go to press, every single day there was another article about the explosion of surveillance technology, particularly in the United States. And one instance I can give you is the FAA has been petitioned by the current administration to open up a certain amount of space for drone use in the United States. 106 government entities have now applied to be able to fly drones in the U.S. The FAA, based on all of the petitions it's getting, predicted that we will have upwards of 30,000 drones over the lower 48 in the next 8 years. Very interesting. I love technology. I love technology when it's used to get bad guys. I love when it helps keep our brave men and women safe. If we can keep them out of harm's way and use the technology to get bad guys, I'm all into that. Something I discovered when I was researching the book, Senator Frank Church from Idaho, who did his church committee's investigations into the growing capabilities of the intelligence community to gather intelligence back in the 70s, he was on Meet the Press August 17, 1975. And Frank Church warned that if the National Security Agency ever turned its giant listening ears inward on the United States, he said, we will have crossed a surveillance Rubicon. He said, privacy as we know it will be dead. And he said, heaven forbid we ever have a government that tilts towards tyranny because it will be impossible to launch a second revolution. Such, in 75, was the government's capability to know and hear everything. That's 75. That's before smartphones, before GPS in cars, before us doing emails. We do over 1.1 trillion text messages as Americans a year. It is stunning the amount of digital exhaust that we give off. Now, what happened after 9/11? Those giant listening ears rotated in on the United States. We did it to keep us safe. We have done a lot of things to prevent another 9/11 from happening. So the question I wanted to raise in the book, and I had a fascinating time researching, is how much is being listened to? How much of that digital exhaust is being gathered up? And again, what would happen if that digital exhaust was ever used against good people? The Brookings Institute did a great white paper, and they studied governments around the world, and what they found is when data storage becomes cheaper, governments start surveilling their populations even more. They start recording everything, and they move on the meter from democracy towards tyranny. The cheaper the technology gets, the more invasive the government becomes. They didn't study the U.S., it was outside the U.S., but I thought that was fascinating stuff. Again, this is great grist for the mill for a thriller author. So that's where the concept for Blacklist came from. And I think at this point, John, if we can, I'd like to open it up and we'll do questions. And this is where we'll really start having some fun. So,
if I could just say, we have staff here with microphones in their hands, and you're on TV when you ask a question. So we ask for you to wait till you get the microphone in your hand before you ask. And we've got several minutes for questions, so I think we can take a number of them.
We have a young lady right. Oh,
yeah.
No, sorry, that's
right back here. Yeah.
Yep.
Brad, hi.
Hi.
Who is Scott Harvath? Who did you base the character on?
Thank you. That's a great question. To a large degree, Scott Harvath is my alter ego. He gets to do the stuff that Mrs. T won't let me go out and do. I'm like, that lady, I heard her speak in Russian. I think she's an agent. Mrs. T's like, this is the grocery store. It's not an agent. You don't get to go seduce the Russian lady in the cereal aisle. Let's go, Romeo. She's got a great sense of humor. He really is my alter ego, just the same way I believe that James Bond was for Ian Fleming and Jack Ryan was for Tom Clancy. He's a composite of a lot of brave men who I know and a couple of women who have been doing some of this country's most dangerous business in places far away on the other side of the world that I feel we're very lucky to have doing what they're doing for us. And there's one person in particular that is the model for Scott Harvath, although I've grafted certain things of the other people onto. And we do have them out there. There's a few, there's not enough of them, but we do have some Scott Harvaths out there that risk their own career by breaking the rules to get the right thing done. A lot of these people are shackled with red tape, and it makes it very difficult for them to keep us safe. Another question.
Over here.
Hi.
Hi.
I got two questions, if I can. I was wondering if you support a full repeal of the Patriot Act or a modification of it.
Well, that's a great question. I have not read the Patriot Act from cover to cover. You know, when the Patriot Act was enacted, when I kind of breezed through it and hit executive summaries that friends of mine had given me after 9/11, I was, you know, let's do it, let's do it, let's do it. My thing at the end of the day is a certain amount of stuff you put out into the public sphere, you shouldn't expect any privacy. So if you're going to put stuff on Twitter, you can put it on Facebook, it's out there. That's the same thing as going up to the church door and nailing it on there. It's there and you don't own it, and it's out there in the public sphere. My concern is, and this was a great cocktail party conversation, because you would find, I got answers from people I couldn't believe. You would find certain people that said, if I'm not doing anything, the government can look at anything of mine they want, they're only going to get bored. I was like, okay, that's interesting. And then I had people who were, and I'm the grenade thrower. Nobody will invite me back to dinner parties anymore. My wife's like, we've got one group of friends that'll have us. Don't make anybody cry. Don't make anybody angry, okay? I want to come back here. So there's this other group that is vehemently against it. That was the fascinating thing for me as I was throwing this out at cocktail parties. And one of the games that I would play is okay, if you're willing to have your entire life thrown open to a government that you trust, are you also okay if they send police officers to your house at any time, day or night, to look through your drawers and read your journal to see if you're intending to do something wrong? Now understand, I am the straightest arrow you will ever meet. I am the biggest law and order, biggest pro-military, pro-police guy you're ever going to meet. But I do believe that we as stewards of our republic have a duty to keep this Leviathan in D.C. under control. That is one of the things that I so admired about President Reagan. Second question.
I don't know if you're familiar with the movie The Lives of Others.
Oh, great. Has anybody in here seen The Lives of Others about the East German couple that were monitored by the Stasi? Yeah, great movie.
Yeah, I was curious if you think, if that sort of thing is going on today with certain...
I don't think so. I don't ascribe evil motives to the government. I actually think the government is filled with wonderful people that believe they're doing the right thing. There's a million things that the founders warned us about with government and the growth of government and all that kind of stuff. I don't believe there's anybody doing it with any ill intent, and I think we're able to prevent a lot of crime because of aggressive surveillance by our law enforcement. Look, the FBI was putting GPS devices under very bad people's cars, and it went through the court system. FBI said this isn't a search, and the courts came back and said, yeah, it is, and you're going to have to get a warrant. And the FBI said, fine, that's what we'll do. So we do have a system of checks and balances. But again, I'm projecting forward. Charles Cook at National Review did a great article 2 weeks ago about the 30,000 drones in next 8 years, and brought up exactly what I was saying at the cocktail parties, is how do you feel about this? And Charles Cook, God bless him. I'm the writer, and he's a journalist, so he's a writer too, but I would have loved to have come up with what he said. He said just because a farmer has one good harvest, it doesn't mean that he believes it augurs good harvests in perpetuity. And just like we have a good government now that's not abusing the surveillance technology, doesn't mean that at some point in the future it might not be abused. And I'm trying to throw this out there and just get people thinking. That's what I wanted to do by using this as a topic. So thank you for your question.
Over here, and then we'll go here.
Yes. I got a question over here.
Oh, there you are, sorry.
The different military groups that you've worked with and the different special operation groups and CIA groups, which one is your favorite group that you worked with, most interesting? And then the second question is have you met Marcus Luttrell?
Yep, well, good, two great questions. I love being around patriots, period. And it doesn't matter what group they're from. And so the type of men and women who have been kind, I couldn't write my books if I didn't have good men and women who are out there doing it on a daily basis, that go away far from the flagpole and, like I said, do some of this nation's some of the deadliest business that we can possibly ask a citizen to do. So I'm very fortunate. There have been people in the military, people in the law enforcement communities, and people in the intelligence world who have been very kind to me and helpful with the books. They've all been great. I can't single out actually a single group. And yes, I have had the incredible honor of meeting Marcus Luttrell. He is one heck of a soft-spoken, fantastic, patriotic American who went through hell, basically. I can't imagine what it's like to have been through what he's gone through. But he's a great guy, great American, and he's a great role model for all of us as citizens, somebody that committed to the defense of his country. Wonderful guy. Thank you for asking about him.
Over here in the middle.
Hi. The FDA this morning approved a small grain of sand-sized device that you can ingest, and it gives you stuff like blood pressure and whatnot that then transmits to your doctor's office. Where do you see that kind of technology as far as?
It's a great question.
And then where do you see us as patriots having to, what can we do to help prevent that kind of abuse of information?
Well, okay, so two very good questions. One of the things that I write about in the book that I'm fascinated with is a technology called RFID chips, so radio frequency identification chips. These things are going on the back of almost every product you buy in the grocery store and the pharmacy. It helps with inventory management and all this kind of stuff. But what some people who are, I don't consider myself a futurist. I consider myself kind of a threat projectionist and looking forward for threats. But what I do see, and I've read some fascinating stuff about the RFID chips going on the consumer products we use, is if we go to the smart grid, guess what gets plugged into the smart grid? Smart appliances. Well, guess what a smart refrigerator looks like? It actually has balances and scales on your shelving in there. So at 3 in the morning, if you go grab that huge thing of Ben & Jerry's and take 3 scoops out and then put it back, all of a sudden it knows that you've taken X amount of weight out of the Ben & Jerry's ice cream, which goes transmitted out, goes blah, 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 and that's contrary to what your doctor said or your insurance policy. So the ability, I mean, this is legit technology. It's what they're working on. As a matter of fact, part of that technology with the smart refrigerators is being billed as the refrigerator will send a note to your smartphone to let you know, hey, your husband was in the refrigerator last night, you're low on ice cream, pick up some on the way home from the store. That's the good, listen, there's some wonderful, technology is fantastic. I'm a big firearms guy, and I've said a firearm is an inanimate object. What matters is what the person who picks it up does with it. A firearm is not evil, it's nothing, it's what gets done with it. Oh, bunch of evil gun owners. Shame on you Second Amendment freaks. Shame on you. So that's a potential use for that stuff. So yeah, I'm not swallowing anything that radios out to my doctor. That's not going to happen. Not going to happen. But so that's something. So as far as what we do as citizens, right now there's legislation that's started in the House and some in the Senate about, particularly with the drones. That's the big thing now that we're hearing. And we're actually seeing some bipartisan coming together on the drone stuff. Legislation always lags technology. The government gets technology, then starts trying to figure out what they're going to do with it, and it takes a while to catch up with the legislation. So the thing is to encourage your representatives, all right? Remember, they work for you. To encourage your representatives to take up this issue, organize with people who feel the same way, and get them to carry on with trying to legislate this stuff so that it's not invasive. It doesn't violate your privacy. Now remember, the stuff you put out on Facebook and Twitter, that's out there. But I believe to a certain degree, if I'm using a private email account, not a free Yahoo or Gmail, then I'm entitled to a certain degree of privacy. The government should not be dipping into my emails or my text messages with my wife. It's just me. Again, straight arrow, pro-government. I vote the right way. I'm not funny, even though I'm from Chicago. I know how to vote. Good guy. And I only vote once. You vote once.
Over here. And then we'll come back to you.
Hey, Brad.
Hey, Jason.
You have a lot of weapons technology in your books. I want to know if they're public knowledge or do you have some secret guy feeding you info?
Yeah, my secret guy club. unless the weapon is bolted to an airframe of some sort, I've fired it if it's in the books. And then if it's bolted to an airframe, I say, oh, what's that red button? Don't touch the red button. So I try to get out and shoot. I love weapons. I love my pistols. I love my rifles, all kept outside the state of Illinois. I don't own a single thing in Illinois. Because you're not supposed to, you're not allowed to, and Mayor Rahm Emanuel may be watching this right now. And I know he cares deeply about me. I'm not responsible enough to own a firearm. My goodness, it's amazing the city of Chicago even lets me raise children. I mean, that's incredible. So yeah, I do everything that's in the books. I've worked with, I've fired, I've had exposure to, and that's, again, I couldn't do what I do without wonderful men and women who say, you know what, we're happy to show you how this works. Come spend a couple of days in training with us.
Right here?
Yes.
Here's your microphone right here.
Thank you. Brad, we saw you last week in an interview with Imus, Don Imus. And we hadn't seen you before. You were so comfortable in that interview, and we've seen other authors who are not comfortable at all. Could you comment on your relationship with Don Imus?
With Don Imus.
This is Imus in the morning.
Well, thank you. Don Imus is a great guy. Don Imus threw me a couple curveballs. I'm not a sports guy, and the first question Don asked me is about a New York sports writer who I didn't know, and then he asked me about somebody in the rodeo, and I didn't have an answer for that, too. And it's funny, because when I did the show, they said, okay, look at this camera, and we're going to have a monitor right there so you can watch Imus. The monitor never came up, so it's fine. I have him in my ear, so I didn't see him. And it's probably good, because apparently, when I didn't know who these two people were, a rodeo guy and a New York sports writer, Imus was just sitting there shaking his head back and forth. And I was like, uh-oh, because Imus had introduced me, had teased the segment saying, oh, we got Brad Thor coming up. He was here last year. I must have liked him if he's back. And so I thought, okay, I got to perform really well. And I bomb on, Imus is a sports guy, and I bomb on the rodeo thing, and I bomb on the New York sports writer. We're talking, and it's going pretty well. And I'm like, I got to pull this out because he might not ask me back. And so I figured, all right, I'm gonna go cheap and play a card because he loves this person. And I said, Don, it's been great. You and I have so much in common. I said, we're both in love with Mary Madeline. And we both know Mary Madeline, so that was I think my one ace in the hole that I played with Don Imus. But we'll see if I'm asked back on the show next year or not. But a lot of authors just want to write their books and kind of not have to do what I'm doing right now. A lot of people just aren't comfortable with media or even public speaking. And I remember my heart used to pound when I would go on those shows. I would think, oh, there's so many people watching. And now I just ignore the camera, and it's one of those things that gets easier, and I enjoy it because a personality like Don Imus is fun to go spar with a little bit, and so I love it now, so it doesn't spook me anymore, but it did at one point.
Over here. And then
Hello.
Yes, hi.
Do you think that this sitting Supreme Court has the capability to do anything about the increased surveillance, what I consider to be a very significant and severe problem? As a private citizen, I stepped into a national security issue, and I had the misfortune of being placed under surveillance by the U.S. government and stalked and harassed by the U.S. military for a significant period of time.
Well, I hope you weren't stalked and harassed by the U.S. military on U.S. soil, because they don't do that. They're not supposed to do
They
that.
did.
We have posse comitatus in this country. As far as the Supreme Court is
I
concerned,
did experience that, in fact.
It's no good when any citizen is a citizen who has done nothing wrong is placed under undue scrutiny. I mean, that's not good. As far as the current Supreme Court is concerned, I think I'm seeing stuff on both sides of the political aisle where people are concerned about the boom in surveillance technology. So I think eventually we'll if we don't see the legislation that curbs it, I think you'll eventually see a lawsuit of some sort that will work its way up to the top. And I do have faith that they would do the right thing on this, because I think it's got an appeal on both sides.
over here in the middle.
Yes.
Brad, we've had leaks out of every administration, out of every government, out of every congressional committee. Leaks are universal. But lately, in the last couple of years, we're seeing a level of leaks that seem to be more purely driven for political purposes or PR or manning up. And I'm just wondering what your take is on that. Do you see the fear in that the rest of us are maybe seeing?
Leaks are bad. Leaks are very, very bad, and administrations do their utmost to curtail those and in trying to make sure they don't happen. when you have leaks, as you've said, that are done to score political points or to make to burnish your credentials in particular areas where you feel that they're lacking, that's extremely dangerous. A leak is very, very bad whenever it happens. But if you have systematic leaking where the leaking is done, that's a very short-sighted. If that's exactly what's going on, it's a very short-sighted view that actually puts the country in danger, listen, I was stunned that we heard what SEAL team it was that took down Osama bin Laden. That's something we never should have heard about. These men are known as the quiet professionals for a reason. So yeah, if we eventually find out that the leaks were done on purpose to burnish credentials, that's terrible. It's not good. But I'm on the record for saying leaks, period, are bad. There's a reason that we keep certain things quiet. The American people, certain things need to be kept quiet. We don't need to have access to every single thing. So, yeah, that's a good question.
Right over here in the front.
Hi.
Well, thank you for putting your hand.
Hi. With the passage of the new healthcare law, paired with technology, I'm wondering if you see anything like a kind of Logan's Run kind of thing going against the elderly and the Medicare, to get rid of them because they're going to take up too much money, too much blah, 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 whatever.
It's a great question. All you have to do is look at Europe. They're the canary in the coal mine. It's unsustainable. There is rationing of all kinds. It's a bad thing. I mean, there's an old radio address of President Reagan addressing socialized medicine. And if you haven't heard it, go on YouTube and look it up and listen to it. It's fantastic because President Reagan warned us, I think it was back in the 1960s when that ran, maybe even earlier, of the dangers of socialized medicine. This is 1/6 of our economy. And this is the same government that runs the post office, and they're going to run our health care? I don't think it's going to work out. So, and I'm a big guy. I'm a big believer in let the free market work. Let insurance companies compete across state lines. And here's the other thing we never hear. How big was that Healthcare Reform Act? Not a single word in there about tort reform. My wife is a physician. Guess what? Remember when we used to hear, oh, you had a headache. Take 2 of these and call me in the morning? They don't say that anymore. You have to get an MRI, you have to get a CAT scan because the doctors are practicing defensive medicine. So what we need is less regulation, not more. That is often the answer in the free market, and it works.
Just to change the mood for a tiny bit.
Sure.
I would love to hear about how you go about writing a particular novel. Do you start out with an idea and outline it? Do you write the whole book and then go through and edit it? How long does it take? I think that'd be fascinating to hear.
Well, thank you. The process is different for everyone. I'll tell you a neat little story. To get going, to get permission to start, I have to turn an outline in to my editor. Now, Robert Frost was famous for saying, no joy in the writer, no joy in the reader. No surprise in the writer, no surprise in the reader. And so I try to do the slimmest outline possible to get okayed to go and do it, because I want to know I've got a guy who's got a briefcase with something important. He's been shot 3 times. He's leaving a trail of blood. He's got to get to the train station on the other side of Zurich, and he's got 6 guys chasing him on motorcycles. I don't know how he's going to get there, but he is going to get there. So if I do too much, it takes the joy out of me. It takes the surprise out of me. My friend Dan Brown, we're being televised. Sorry, Dan, I'm going to let this one out. My friend Dan Brown was very kind and shared the outline for Da Vinci Code with me once. There was a winding, dark stone staircase, and you had to reach up on the torch and pull it down, and then the wall went back, and more steps. I'm kidding. It was like a coffee table sort of a thing, but that sounds a lot better when you're talking about Dan Brown. But Dan shared with me the outline for Da Vinci Code. I have never seen a more beautiful, I mean, he could have published the outline. It was stunning, and its depth and its detail, and I was blown away by it, and I thought, I can't do that, though. If I knew every single point, it wouldn't make it exciting. There'd be no joy in this writer. So I come up with an idea. It's normally something that I'm interested in, that I want to learn more about. So in this case, I was interested in the explosion of surveillance technology with Blacklist. I wanted to know more about that. But there are some pieces you have to put into the equation. Who's the bad guy? What does the good guy want to get? Who are the supporting characters? So it's kind of like mounting an opera. if you will. You've got to decide all these different things. What are the costumes going to look like and blah, blah, blah. But I have two beautiful children in addition to my beautiful wife, and I want to be home as a dad. I want us to eat at the dinner table together because I think there's nothing better you can do for a strong family than to have dinner together every single night. So, thank you. So, I get up in the morning, I work out, then I'm in the office, and my goal is 2,500 words a day when I'm working on a book, when I'm out of the research phase and in the writing phase. So that's about 5 single-space pages. And there was, and I'm going to forget who to attribute this to, but the people said, well, what's the key to success, blah, 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 blah. It's very simple. It's seat of pants to seat of chair. It is no more complicated than that. I'm a small businessman. That's what I am. I have a product. I love coming on book tour because I work for all of you. You're my customers. It allows me to get out and see the people who make my job possible, who I'm creating the product for. I work all year thinking about all you folks. I can't wait to get out and see you and see how's the product going. Do you like it? Are you telling your friends about it? So I consider myself a capitalist. There is the art that goes in there. There's a lot of art that goes in it, but I still look at it to a certain degree, not cold like a business, but I do treat it like a business in the sense that you all can go out and make more money. The one thing you can't make more of is your time. It's the most valuable commodity you possess. I owe it to you to be the absolute best I can be, to give you the best thrill ride I'm capable of, to come up with an idea that nobody's doing, even Brad Meltzer. I got to give you the best book that I've got in me, and that's my goal because we have a relationship, and you're trusting me. You can't read the book and then pay me for it. You're going and you're buying the book. That trust is very important to me. Your loyalty is very important to me. The best thing in the world for an author is word of mouth. Word of mouth can build an author. It can kill an author. And that's one thing that I've always kept very close to me. I will never phone in a book. I promise you, I will never phone one in. I take each book and I say, if nobody knew who I was in New York Publishing, is the most recent book I'm writing, is it good enough to get me a contract? And if I feel it is, then I'm doing my job. But at the end, the ultimate decision resides with you. So I hope that answers your question a little bit about my process.
Here in the middle, we've got time for like 2 more questions.
2 more questions?
Yep.
Go on. You answered his question.
Oh, I answered. Okay.
Great.
Fantastic.
Over here, and then we'll come over here.
Brad, just a quick question. I assume you travel quite a bit commercially. Tell me your thoughts about how secure you feel when you go through the check-in lines at the airports.
I'll tell you what, you're going to love this. So I never go through the body scan, okay? It's not because I'm shy. It's because I went and I didn't do it once, and the first time I said no to the body scan thing, I said, okay, I'll take the pat down. The gentleman's patting me down, and he said, well, why didn't you do it? And I said, well, I said, I don't know that the radiation is safe. He says, it's safe. And I said, well, who told you that? And he said, well, the government. I said, again, same government that runs the post office and manages the no-fly list, right? Same government. And he said, and he kind of was like, yeah. And I said, and don't forget, 4 out of 5 doctors used to recommend Chesterfield cigarettes too. All right, so for health reasons, I'm not into it. I believe that we spend too much time in this country fighting in our rearview mirror. We are fighting the old attacks, not the next attacks. And that's a big problem from a security standpoint. Those body scanners wouldn't have caught the shoe bomber. They wouldn't have caught the underwear bomber. But guess what? There are a lot of people who are making a lot of money in that industry with some great contacts in DC selling those body scanners all over the place. I don't like it. And the other thing I don't like is that here's my deal. I love the guys at TASER. I think that's a great tool for police officers to have. I'd like it if people who qualify go on airplanes and you're able to bring your TASER with you. You know what? Now, what might happen is some guy's not feeling well and he gets up to go to the bathroom too fast and 12 people zap him. You know, you got to make an omelet, you got to break a couple of eggs, right? It's gonna happen. But as far as the security at the airports, I used to make a joke. Every year I'd be on book tour and I'd go through and I'd say no and I'd get the pat down and then I'd go on Twitter and say, thank God I get at least a little human contact. Somebody touched me, I miss my wife. I used to do that. I just stopped when I was in Denver. I had a young Marine back from Iraq who was now working for TSA. Could not have been nicer. Could not have been more professional, and that stopped me making fun. I said, if we got great guys like this working there, I'm not going to make fun of this organization anymore. It's not his fault he's got to do that. If I don't like it, I can take it up with the government. It's not that young man's fault. So that changed my making fun of that. But So anyway, I still don't believe it's the right way to be doing things. I understand Israel has a lower traffic flow through their airports than we do, but I think there's a lot of stuff. If I could redo TSA, I would have it be all wounded vets first, particularly vets that man checkpoints in Marja and Fallujah, people who know what to look for. Those are the guys I want looking for the bad guys at my airports.
I think we have time
This young
for
lady
one
right
last
up here?
question right here, yeah. Angie?
Right here, this young lady in the
in the
pink, right up here,
Right here.
third row in the center, please. The young lady. By the way, a lot of USC people here. Remember, don't tell them you're from Notre Dame, okay? Today at the Ronald Reagan Library, film at 11. No, I'm sorry. What's your question?
So Scott Harvath has been around for a while now, and maybe he's getting a little older. I don't know. How far do you see him going, and do you see a new character maybe coming under his wing and going from that, or where do you see Scott Harvath going?
Great question. Up until about 3 books ago, Scott Harvath aged 1 year, as I aged 1 year. I turned 40 and thought, ooh, I'm not so crazy about this aging thing, and every year I'm going to have to get 1 year older. You've got great writers like, I really love Clive Cussler. I've always enjoyed Clive's books, and he's got Dirk Pitt, and Dirk Pitt hasn't aged. I have aged Scott Harvath. I have condensed my last 3 Harvath books into almost the space of 1 year. So he's had 1 character year for really 3 years of books. I love him. It's funny because people say, oh, he used to be such a smart aleck, now he's not. And I said, well, I can show you where the pivot point was. That's when I had kids, and I wasn't so much of a smart aleck anymore because I was only getting 45 minutes of sleep a night. So he changed as I changed. In the last summer's book, Full Black, I did something interesting, which was, for the first time, Harvath couldn't lead a team in the door. He couldn't be at the front of the stack going in. He had to take a management role and let the team go in and be a leader. And that's something that's fun for me to explore with him. I also introduced a younger character that he worked with a little bit, starting back in Full Black. He was introduced in Foreign Influence, named Chase. And so I've got that. So I'm playing with both. At this point, everybody loves Scott Harvath. I love him. He's still able to do what he does, but maybe his shoulder hurts a little bit longer than it normally does, and he's pumping out the vitamin M, as the SEALs call Motrin. So I'm still playing with it, but yeah, I do at some point. I can't have him be 60 and rolling up and then kicking the door in and shooting the bad guy between the eyes. I mean, it's got to be. So I am trying to introduce other characters, but he's always going to be part of it, and so I'm playing with it and seeing what kind of feedback that I get from readers. So I think that was our last question. So
yeah. Well, let me just say, Brad, on behalf of everyone here, everyone at the foundation, we cannot thank you enough for coming. It's just been delightful. I know we could spend the rest of the evening with these questions, but you've just been magnificent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Brad. It's terrific.